Mr. Deputy Chancellor, it is my honor to present to you Chantal He, renowned journalist and political commentator on Canadian and Quebec politics. Chantal He is a national affairs writer with the Toronto Star and a guest columnist for L Actualite. She is also a highly regarded participant on the political panel at issue on CBC's The National, as well as appearing on Radio Canada's Les coulisses du pouvoir. Viewers tune in to hear Chantal speak with authority and passion on public policy and Canadian politics. She brings a unique voice to her assessment of current events, that of a francophone with strong ties to English Canada. Elle a commencé sa carrière en 1975 comme journaliste à la salle régionale de nouvelles de Radio-Canada à Toronto, puis sur la colline parlementaire pour la Radio nationale de Radio-Canada. Madame Hébert a été chef du bureau parlementaire pour les quotidiens Le Devoir et La Presse. Son regard sur les affaires publiques et nationales fait autorité dans les médias tant anglophones que francophones. Ms. Hébert is a graduate of Glendon College, York University, a senior fellow of Massey College at the University of Toronto, and holds honorary doctorates from Bishop's University, York University, and the University of Western Ontario. Her remarkable work has earned her numerous awards, including 2 Asia-Pacific Media Fellowships in Malaysia and Japan, the 2005 Apex Public Service Award, the 2006 High Solomon Award for Excellence in Journalism and Public Policy, and York University's Pinnacle Achievement Bryden Alumni Award. And just a few days ago, she won the National Magazine Award, the highest award in the industry, for her columns in L Actualite. Elle est aussi l'auteur d'un ouvrage intitulé French Kiss, Stephen Harper et le Québec. Et en 2012, Madame Hébert a été nommée officière de l'Ordre du Canada. Mr. Deputy Chancellor, on behalf of Senate and the Board of Governors, it is my privilege and honor to present to you Chantal He so that you may confer upon her the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa.
It gives me great pleasure to ask Dr. He to make her remarks.
A secret of people who sit at convocations on these podiums is that sometimes they like to look at shoes, and so I figured I should give them something to look at. And I brought my best sandals to this occasion, but I suspect some of you will beat my sandals big time. I don't fall off them, which is very useful if you have to do what I have to do today. Ça me fait plaisir d'être ici, une université de montréalaise, moi qui suis ontarienne et qui ai adopté Montréal comme ma ville d'adoption. Je vais vous donner des grands conseils de vie qui vont vous être très utiles, j'en doute pas, et je vais essayer not to switch de l'anglais au français as Justin Trudeau réussirait à faire, because I am not as good as he is pour faire ça, pourquoi il veut être premier ministre et pas moi. Now, I realized at some point that there was a life lesson thing involved in this exercise, so I figured in front of you, you have someone whose life plan went off the rails. I wanted to be a journalist. That's the only thing that I actually achieved. I chose to go to Glendon College, in large part because I would not have to do any written work in English. I wanted to write in French, and my written English was dismal. I moved to Ontario in grade 9. Grammar was done by the time I moved there. They were doing Shakespeare. I was used to the dog is in the house. So I figured with that gap, I'll go to university and forget about the English language. And I never wrote a word of English for the entire time that I did my degree. So that, so far, was pretty good. I was very shy. So shy that I wasn't sure that I should say good morning to people when they came in the office when I got my first job. So I saw myself as a news editor. I figured I'm going to stay in the newsroom and be one of those behind-the-scene persons that orders the universe and puts more chaos into the news order every night for viewers. My bosses sent me to Queen's Park after I applied for a job as an assignment editor that they obviously did not give me, and they shipped me off to Queen's Park so that I would not be in the newsroom anymore. And that is how I ended up covering the political beat, which is how I've discovered over the years more than half of us end up covering politics. Somebody someday doesn't want them in the newsroom anymore, we usually don't come back. And I didn't. On those flimsy foundations, I started what turned out to be a great journalistic voyage through Canada, and some of the things that I did learn is that you should do what you love, but you should also love what you do. And you should not make a plan unless you really want to use a trash can. Those will be the two life lessons I would leave you with. What I do when I do these things is I try to tell a story about Canada. I'm going to break a vow that I make before coming in here. I promised that I would not mention Stephen Harper's name. I have. It's the end of the Stephen Harper interlude. What I found over the years is that Canada doesn't have a long history. We're not France and Great Britain, and we don't go back to the Middle Ages. And Charlemagne wasn't around to open Concordia or Glendon College. But it is a country that has a lot of stories. And the best stories I found are not always found in Parliament or in convention halls. And because what I do for a living is to tell a story, there is a story that I tell, especially when I come to convocations and places where people tend to be studying in one language in an environment that is dominated by another language, which is fairly typically Canadian. And so I will tell you about my favorite column, which will not involve the name of very many politicians. And it goes back to the mid-90s. At a time when journalists had more time on their hands, as you will see, because we were not filing to the internet, we were not tweeting, and we were not on Facebook. So there was time to sit around at lunchtime and get suggestions from people as to stories to pursue, and a friend of mine called me and said, I have a great story, I think, for you. It's not terribly parliamentarian, but it is a great story. The Metro Toronto Zoo is fundraising. And it's been calling people around to ask for money. And they called my house last night, and they said, oh, you have a French name? You should really want to give us money this year because we've had to spend more money to hire a French language trainer because our hippopotamus, which came from Quebec, was having adjustment issues. And we needed someone to talk it through living in the zoo. Now, I thought this was kind of interesting, and it was lunchtime, which on Parliament Hill is a 2-hour thing until question period comes. There is no one in the office to answer serious phone calls, so I figured, why not? This sounds like a really strange, weird story. So having been a young kid whose parents took their kids to zoos, the only zoo that came to mind at first was the Zoo de Granby in the Eastern Township. So I figured, well, I'm going to try the PR department at the Zoo de Granby. So I call and I say, I work for La Presse. My name is so-and-so, and I want to check something with you. Apparently, the Metro Toronto Zoo is calling people to ask for money and telling Francophones that they should give more because they've had to hire a French-speaking trainer for an hippopotamus from Quebec. And the person answers, it's impossible. All our animals are bilingual. So I thought, okay, changing gears rapidly, as journalists will do when confronted with something that doesn't quite fit the answer they expect. She says, in the Eastern Townships, as you know, there's a very bilingual population, and our zoo is very bilingual, so our animals are very exposed to English. She says, I think it comes from the Lac Saint-Jean area. You should call the Zoo of Saint-Félicien. So having bought into a story that I didn't expect to be the story that I was getting, I did call the Zoo de Saint-Félicien and asked for the same equivalent person and put the question to that person, but in a different tone. I asked as if it were a serious question. And the person answered yes. We did send an hippopotamus to the Metro Toronto Zoo. And it is true that our hippopotamus did not understand any English. We are a very Francophone area, and we do not have anyone on staff that actually speaks English to the animals, and we're aware, and we felt sorry for the animal and for the zoo that they had these adjustment issues. And so I can confirm that when the Metro Toronto Zoo is asking for this money, it is actually based on something that they've had to do. Now, what did I do with that story? I'm a political journalist. It doesn't sound like someone that's got a lead, like, unilingual hippopotamus causes language havoc in Toronto. At the time, the big political story that derived from the first Jean Chrétien budget was that the government was closing down the military college in Saint-Jean, Quebec, and every officer was going to be trained in the future in Kingston, Ontario. And the government's thesis was that Kingston was bilingual enough to foster bilingual officers. And so I wrote the zoo story, and it finished with the federal government wants people to believe that Ontario is bilingual enough for army officers to be bilingual, but it is not yet bilingual enough for an hippopotamus from Saint-Félicien. And I have to say that over the years, when I come to colleges like this, I am happy that there are now, across this country, so many campuses where this hippopotamus from the Saguenay would be made to feel at home, as I have been felt at home in all of the places that I visited. Now, normally I would stop here, but you are a special group of students. You studied in Montreal over an incredible time in this province's history. You went through the corruption issue. You saw us, if you're from out of town, lose a few mayors. You were here for the Quebec Spring, which was of direct interest, I suspect, to many of you. It was certainly a different time to be going to university in Canada. And you were here for the debate charter. And I think that you, going through all these things, have had experience as to how hard debates really are and how they can bring out all kinds of comments that are difficult for one side or the other. But what I hope you also take away from this is that it is good for societies to have real debates. That if we have them more often, we would vote more. And when politicians bring these issues or are forced to debate these issues to voters, we are able to answer in kind and to come to decisions and to vote. And that is what democracy is about. We say a lot of things about our politicians, that they talk down at us, that they are simplistic, that they cheapen issues. But often we put a do not disturb sign on our own doors as voters, and we say, don't bother us with real societal issues. Why would you ask us to have to think about these things that are not pleasant and that are sometimes black and white and not easy to navigate through? You were very fortunate to watch these debates. You have been very fortunate to watch people vote, as many of you probably did, and then move on. And I hope it encourages you to ask more of your politicians, and what I think you should ask more of your politicians to do is to ask more of you. Thank you.
Dr. Hébert, merci pour vos remarques et félicitations. My father always said that the government could make a horse a camel. And I know if we ever have one, I'm going to invite you to make sure that it's a bilingual one. Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us today.